Hi, and welcome everyone. I am here to talk about all things related to relationship messiness because, as many of you know who are in attendance, uncovering betrayal or unknown addictions from an intimate or by an intimate trusted partner can shatter the reality of our lives and relationships as we know it. Beyond the immediate pain of a partner cheating or abusing substances will also exist a complicated web of trauma, shame, and grief that has been brought on by the months or even years of deceit that took place, the gaslighting, the emotional abuse, the neglect that all often accompany most betraying behaviors. My name is Kristin Snowden. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist in the state of California, and I specialize in helping individuals and couples who are in crisis because of infidelity, brought on by uncovering addictions, betrayal, etc. Today's webinar, we're going to explore the complex multi-levels of grief and loss that surface after uncovering betrayal. Just to clarify, when I'm talking about, I throw around the word betrayal, infidelity, addiction, but when I'm talking about those struggles, complications in a relationship dyad, I'm referring to infidelity, cheating, problematic porn use, secret addictions, substance abuse issues, chronic lying, cheating, gaslighting, or financial or emotional abuse that can all occur within an intimate relationship. So even if you are currently living the best case scenario post betrayal, where maybe the person who has harmed you, who betrayed you, has owned up to what has happened, they've come clean, they're diligently working towards recovery or rebuilding trust with you. Even if that best case scenario exists, betrayed partners will still experience deep levels of grief and loss. So I want you to remember that. I often talk about the three heavy hitters, which are universal experiences of all people who are betrayed partners. And that's the trauma, the shame, and the grief and loss. And I want you to know that even if you're experiencing the best case scenario, you'll still struggle with these three big heavy hitters. Grief and loss can come and go at any time. It can wash over a betrayed partner like a tsunami and just take them out, or it can just be a tiny little trickle of moments that are constant and consistent. Similar to a betrayed partner struggle with trauma and shame, grief and loss can feel overwhelming, impossible to understand and tame and unravel. It can be the element in your life that stifles your healing process and can contribute to you feeling stuck in that suffering state after the crisis has occurred. That's why we have grief groups. So people like me on KristinSnowden.com and Sex and Relationship Healing, we have groups and tools to act as guidance and support to help betrayed partners move through these complicated emotions and on to the other side where you no longer feel like you're hijacked and owned by these complicated emotions of trauma, shame, and grief, all experiences that accompany deep levels of betrayal. My goals for the webinar today are to help you better understand the vast array of grief and loss issues that surface after betrayal. We cannot acknowledge and process what we don't even understand, where we just kind of feel like it's a giant storm in us instead of being able to kind of pick apart specifically what is overwhelming us, what is poking at our nervous system. Well, I also want to offer you some very specific tools and exercises that I've created to help you continue the healing process. A few of these exercises and handouts that I'm going to show you today will be on my free resources page. There's links down in the description. And some of them are just part of my curriculum that I have for my grief groups. So go ahead and look at that free resources link and kind of click through there to find those handouts. It is common for betrayed partners to really want to skip over and ignore the messy emotions of grief, shame, trauma. One of the biggest reasons why is because you're busy putting out fires and dealing with the crisis at hand. Every day, you're trying to figure out how to handle your body, how to get out of bed, put clothes on, go to work, take care of your family, pay the bills. Those are all immediate needs that have to be dealt with. Beyond that, depending on what your crisis looked like, if it's led to divorce and you're a single parent, or if your partner has or continues to engage in acting out behaviors, a lot of your time and energy is also devoted to dealing with that family, with making money, with seeing what your betraying or addict partner is doing, try to get them in recovery and other immediate crisis issues. So I want to acknowledge sitting down and doing this grief work, just like this shame and trauma work, is difficult. No one wants to sit down and say, hey, I'm going to torture myself for a while I explore all that I've grieved and lost and what I currently and continuously will long for. But our body yearns to acknowledge these losses. If you don't acknowledge them, they will kind of just continue to float around in your head like harmful debris. Our bodies and our minds crave to have all things acknowledged, all that happened, that we're not okay, and have others around us who can validate us, can help us understand that we're not crazy. We have the right to feel so sad, so hurt, so lost, so rejected, so traumatized. And then the important part is finding a way to create a story of empowerment despite the loss and the fact that we were victimized. So those who listen to my webinars know I talk about these two big things over and over again, which is when you have been traumatized, because betrayal is traumatizing, you experience four major losses, which is loss of control, loss of choice, loss of context, what the heck is happening, what's going on here, and loss of connection with yourself, with your instincts, with your partner, with others around you. And the four common ways that we have learned people need to go through this process in order to heal their trauma, their grief and loss, their shame, is through one, acknowledging what has happened, what isn't okay. Then sharing that story with someone or a group or a therapist or 12 steps, saying this is what happened that wasn't okay, and have those people listen and validate and acknowledge, yes, you're right, that was not okay. Then go over, to some extent, the harm that's been caused, the trauma that you've experienced, using downregulation skills. And then subsequently find a way to create a story of empowerment around it after it. So those are all on my trauma-related videos, but we're going to shift back to grief. So what does one grieve exactly after betrayal? Because sometimes we have a really hard time saying there was no loss in the family, no one died, no big, life event occurred geopolitically. You still might have a partner, or okay, you're getting divorced. Everyone gets divorced. What could you possibly be grieving over? Like, what's going on? But grief occurs anytime there's this kind of giant gaping canyon between reconciling what our previous life looked like, who we were, how we thought life was, and what our current reality is now. Our current, much more painful, much more confusing, much more gray life that we're leading now. It's a wound that surfaces from any kind of loss where our brain tries to reconcile a new life with new truths, and we just feel ill-prepared to endure this new life and new reality. And so that experience that goes on in our body is grief, grieving, loss, and longing. Because after betrayal, we have to rumble with a new reality where your partner is capable of doing horrible things that you never knew he or she was capable of doing. You had no idea the person they were capable of being. All the lying, the leading double life, the fact that you thought that they were your teammate and you guys were all making decisions and adjusting priorities according to shared values. And suddenly, this new reality is that your partner was not on board for any of that. There's also a new reality where maybe your partner exposed you and your family to risk and harm. A new reality where he or she had different priorities, behaved dramatically different from who you thought he or she was capable of being, who you thought any human was capable of being. A new reality where your family and every other relationship now looks and feels completely foreign. A new reality where you can no longer trust your instincts and intuition to keep yourself safe. And you now question every choice and person around you. These are the issues that surface after betrayal. This constant mind-blowing fight and conflict that occurs in your heart and body is exactly what grief and loss and longing is. So let me give you some examples from all the years I've worked with betrayed partners who are grieving, what they list as things that have been lost due to the betrayal after uncovering addictions or uncovering infidelity. There's loss of safety, security, instincts, a willingness to be intimate, to have intimacy and connection with another person, loss of memories. So at one point, they had this framework for memories of holidays and vacations, but now they're all soiled because you found out retroactively what your partner was really doing during that time. Loss of what you thought your relationship was, what you thought love was, what you thought marriage was, what family is, and that you thought your person, your partner was this person, a good person, an admirable person, a great father or a great wife. And that whole reality has been shattered, the loss of that. Loss of your confidence in your own ability to make basic choices, knowing just basic questions of who can I trust? What should I say? What should I not say? Can I tell my friend Susie about what happened? I don't know what might happen if I expose this part of my life. Loss of ability to feel comfortable in your own body and sexually. A lot of betrayed partners feel major, major hits in their own value and worth, contributing sometimes and erroneously that their sex life contributed to their partner cheating or straying, that the way they look or their aging body contributed to it. We know that is not all. Any of that is accurate because your partner always has choices and they chose to lie and sneak around and deceive and act out of their values and commitments. But those are still losses that we experience. There's a loss of what is normal, right? There's this craving to go back to this idea that like, I just want to feel normal again. I want to feel like I have a normal relationship, one that doesn't look like it belongs on a really bad Lifetime movie, a normal life. Instead, I've uncovered this lie, this massive lie, and a whole world of liars and cheaters and maybe porn and mind-blowing online cheating, etc., that you were naive to before. There's a loss of hopes and dreams for the future because maybe now you are going to continue life without a partner and you foresaw living forever with your partner, but now you're divorcing. Or being with your family all the time. But again, maybe there's divorce or there's been a break due to uncovering these lies. The idea that maybe you might even stay with your partner, but you just can't count on your partner. That person's not an emotional confidant anymore. You can't lean into or trust your partner anymore. There's a longing for what once was. A lot of betrayed partners say that they wish they could go back to the naivety, the peace, the simpler view of life. Um, Maybe again, they were naive, but it was kind of a naivety that brought more peace to them. They just didn't know there was this whole world out there, and they want to go back to not knowing. Um, a lot of betrayed partners, they grieve the loss of their former self in that they might have been optimistic people or liked to laugh or joke or were maybe more lighthearted or had a more positive belief in humanity. But this constant crisis and this constant struggle with their partner, will they be in recovery? Will they continue to tell the truth? Will they stay on the straight and narrow? How does that affect me in my life? Should I stay? Should I go? Has just sucked the joy out of their life, sucked their ability to look at the world from a positive, optimistic place. They find themselves to be deeply cynical, untrusting of people, and trusting of other women that, put a lot of judgment towards women or other men, in a negative way based on their betrayal. A lot of betrayed partners will talk about feeling like they are now yelling and crying all the time, are so angry, so sad, and grieve their former selves that weren't in those states all the time. There's a financial loss because after uncovering these crises, often you seek out treatment, which can get expensive. There's also financial losses that can occur when your partner is acting out, when they're paying for their acting out behaviors. There's a loss of joy from things that you previously got joy from. So maybe you used to love a certain restaurant or a certain song or music or anniversaries or traveling to places or looking at pictures or attending weddings or holidays. But now, again, those have all been soiled because of your partner's acting out behaviors, where they acted out, how they acted out, when they acted out. And lastly, there's this loss of bodily autonomy. Often betrayed partners will have been given STDs by their partner due to their acting out behaviors, or they will feel like their sex lives were always very confusing. Their sex life was confusing. They didn't understand what was going on in the bedroom. They didn't understand why there was so much fear, shame, confusion around sex, sexuality, intimacy, emotion. And there's this loss that they went through all of life with those really restrictive, painful feelings associated with sex, intimacy, expressing emotion, etc. So these are just a few things that can trigger someone to slip into a state of grief and loss. And it can happen at any time from any particular trigger. So hopefully that list will now kind of set you down this path towards understanding what you're grieving. It can constantly change. It can constantly surface. You might feel like you worked something out and then it comes back up again. Those are all okay. David Kessler once said, and he researches grief and loss all the time, each person's grief is as unique as their fingerprint. But what everyone has in common is that no matter how they grieve, they share a need for their grief to be witnessed. That doesn't mean needing someone to try to lessen it or reframe it for them. The need is for someone to fully present to the magnitude of their loss without trying to point out the silver lining. So when you're asking yourself, okay, I'm grieving, what do I do now? Grief must be acknowledged. It must be felt. It must be shared. It must be heard. It's an extremely important part of the healing process. So what should I do now, Kristin? Well, this is the tools and exercises section. So let me reiterate, no one wants to sign up for grief and loss, shame, and trauma treatment because it's all yucky. It all overwhelms your nervous system, but it's kind of that brutal swamp that we have to swim through in order to get to the other side, where again, we feel like we've regained control of ourselves, of our choice, of context, of connection. So I have a grief and loss group, and I'm just going to reflect upon some of the curriculum that I've created. And the goal for grief and loss is to identify and explore what's been lost, the inventory of losses. So I just went through a lot of those things. Then identify and explore the inventory of emotions, the deep conflicting emotions, the wide array of hurt, love, hope, fear. Again, often they are just battling each other out inside you because they're so contradictory and so conflicting and just struggle with reconciling. Where do we go from here? Another goal is to reaffirm or reconstruct a new reality. So this crisis hit, we got plopped into this new world. We have no idea what the rules are, what's going on here, where I stand in the situation, what's going to happen to me. But part of the grieving and reconstruction process is to start slowly identifying, okay, what is this new reality? And I talk a little bit that this is kind of moving from this dualism way of thinking to a more non-dualistic way of thinking. Another goal is to reconnect with our instincts and intuition, which I believe happens through group work. Because again, the nature of betrayal and loving and living with an addict, it can throw us off. We cannot understand what a healthy boundary is, what a reasonable consequence is, because as we know, our betrayers can be very manipulative, can make us feel like we're crazy, like we don't make sense, like our emotions aren't valid, our needs are unreasonable, all these kind of things. So going to groups with people who've suffered and struggled in a similar way can really help you reconnect with what is reasonable, what makes sense, verbalizing it, hearing other people's stories, etc. So I'm a fan. Develop tools for reconciliation, empowerment, and self-care. Those are also some exercises that we'll go through. So here's just a few of the things that I use, and you can try to recreate them if you want. But I agree with the idea of creating some form of timeline. In the world of sex, love, porn addiction, recovery, we do this thing called a formal therapeutic disclosure, where the betraying partner creates a long timeline of acting out behaviors, dates, times, places. You know, it all depends on what the therapist and the betrayed partner determine they need to hear and know to get a grasp on what the addict partner was doing the whole time, you know, the whole double life living. If you don't have your partner around and you're not doing a formal disclosure, as we all know, or every betrayed partner I've worked with has become an incredible detective. And while they may not 100% know exactly what has happened through looking through credit card records, email accounts, phones, just research, it's always mind-blowing how incredible you betrayed partners can become when you're trying to search for the truth. But you can take all of that information, and I always recommend that you try your best to write it out in a timeline. Because it stops that nagging brain that's like, think about this, think about this. All this information is going to keep you safe. This person's a liar. Don't ever believe them. So when you write it all out and say, you know, on this date, this happened, on this date, this happened, I found this credit card records. First of all, it just establishes a record, because when you're in crisis, and your partner walks in and tries to like minimize what he or she did and said, oh, really wasn't that big deal. No, I didn't lie about that. You have this record to kind of lean back in, which helps you feel less crazy and more stable. But it also, when your lizard survival brain is trying to be like, don't forget these facts. These are all the scary things that have happened to you. Don't forget. And it's nagging and poking at you. Once you write it down, you can kind of say, you know what, brain? Thanks for trying to keep me safe, but I wrote it down. It's not going to be forgotten. I have it. Now I just need to focus on what's going on today. So that's why I think creating a timeline is helpful. It also, by the way, helps you reconnect with your instincts and intuition, because when you go back and do your own timeline, or your partner does the timeline for you in a disclosure, it helps you realize, oh, I was not completely blind to what was going on. I didn't know what was going on, but there were moments and times where I was like, this isn't making sense. Why is he or she so angry? Why does he or she keep disappearing? Why does he keep saying this or that? These behaviors are not matching up. Something is wrong. And going through that timeline and connecting with it can help you realize you do have instincts and intuition. They didn't have all the information they needed to keep you safe, but you did have some cues in your body that something was wrong. Another thing that I offer that is on my website under my free resources tab is a betrayal trauma journal, where I just kind of offer you some reading or writing prompts about the loss that might have occurred due to the betrayal. So you can go ahead and upload that, and it just, again, helps you connect with that inventory of losses. What did you lose? What's going on? The next thing is I start helping your brain as it's cracking into multiple pieces, trying to reconcile the fact that the person that's harmed you the most is the person that you've made yourself most exposed and vulnerable to, that you might love somebody and hate them at the same time, that you might feel hope for what is to be, but deep, deep fear that it may never happen. So there's these very conflicting adversarial emotions, these kind of wars that are going on inside your body. And I like to do some kind of dualism versus non-dualism exercises to help your brain. It literally is like a brain expanding exercise where you will have headaches because your brain's just like, I don't like this. I want to put, your brain is lazy. It wants to put everything in a this category or that category. You're smart or you're dumb. It's black or it's white. You're safe or you're the most dangerous person in the world. There's good and there's bad. That is dualism. It is just a black and white, no variations, no room for gray. And our brains, in order to get through grief and loss and trauma and shame, we have to move our brains into a non-dualism, kind of more gray area. We have to have more like an adaptive understanding. So for those who might be in repair, it might look like my partner is the most dangerous, lying, diabolical person on this earth that should never be trusted. Well, if the person's working towards recovery and doing, strong work in that area, and you have expressed a desire to repair the relationship, then that black and white story is not very adaptive to the goals of what you're trying to move toward. So then you have to kind of dig deeper and get a little bit more specific. When my partner is in his or her addiction, when he or she is not going to therapy, working long hours, not going to meetings or around his or her accountability network, he or she is capable of becoming a diabolical, very dangerous liar. That's why we have these structures in place to stop that from happening. Or there's other ideas that, in a state of trauma, your brain has written these very general stories of trust no one, love no one ever again, never make yourself vulnerable to someone ever again. We as humans crave human contact and we crave connection. So if you want to have a meaningful life, most research shows you need to experience some levels of intimacy and vulnerability with a few safe people. So you need to do some work, change that framework in a way that will allow you to meet a few safe people where you can practice intimacy and vulnerability with them. So that is the exercises of moving from dualism to non-dualism, as we also say, from moving from this very binary black and white space to kind of cracking open your brain and realizing, well, it depends. It could be this, or it could be this, and it could be a little bit of this, and it can be a little bit of this, all at the same time. And sorry, brain, you're just going to have to deal with the open-endedness of this. And that's again where it comes into, and I have to trust my own instincts and intuition to really check in with this in the moment, in the present moment, and decide how I want to move forward with all the information that I currently have. A few more exercises that I use are a parts work journal, and an online, I'm sorry, and I give an example of that. So I'm personally a huge fan of parts work to heal a lot of trauma, shame, and grief and loss. I have some sheets where Dick Schwartz is the creator of Internal Family Systems, where he does some really great work around understanding the multi levels of parts that exist all at the same time. So, like I said, we thought life was just kind of this black and white. My husband or wife is a good person, or we have a good family, or I love my partner. And now just this crisis has caused us to crack these realities into multiple pieces and having to rebuild a new reality. And parts work can really, really help you understand that there's different parts inside us that can receive each one of these stories. So a part of me is invested in being deeply angry with my partner at all times. It's the part that wants to protect me, that wants to keep me safe, that wants me to never, ever be victimized again. And so this is kind of a list. This is not on my website. This is part of my grief and loss curriculum, but helping you go inside your body and notice all the different parts that are kind of speaking up, having lots of feelings and thoughts and stories going on in your head due to the grief, loss, and trauma that exists. So what I do what I will offer you guys is this spreadsheet I've created that is kind of my best go at showing you the process of going through these parts. I always tell clients when we're doing this parts work that the best way to think of all these parts is to imagine them being a lost child on the street, and that you're just trying to sit next to them and they're kind of freaking out and they're acting out in their own pain and struggle, their grief, their loss, their trauma, their shame, their fear, and they're just trying to feel safe again. And they're coming to you, your main self, and saying, don't you know what's happening? Don't you know all this crazy, scary stuff is going on? And you have to kind of sit down and go, no, I don't. Help me understand. What are the stories going on? Why are you so scared? What are you trying to do here? What's your best idea about how to heal? Okay, can I contribute more information to that? Can I update you on the situation? And I also tell my clients, it's like you're the main CEO of the company, and then we're sitting at a boardroom, and there's fear and hypervigilance and shame and anger and the smart person who can talk their way out of everything and the self-help person. And they're all there, and you're just trying to negotiate with them and come up with some solutions. Okay, so I'm going to finish with, oh yeah, and then the last thing I encourage is I have another exercise where it's reconnecting with your younger self. I had a client who was talking about she was coming up on like a wedding and a memory anniversary, and she just walked out on the beach and just tried to really connect with that 20-year-old self that was marrying her husband. And she just sat on that beach and just kind of talked to her and updated her on the good and the bad and the hurt and the pain, and kind of helped her understand like her hopes and dreams were okay, but some things came true, but some things didn't. And it was very painful, but very powerful. And so I think that's a really important walk when you're experiencing and expressing grief, loss, and longing. So let me close with some common big issues that come up when processing grief and loss after betrayal. Grief needs to be processed with others, but I will say we usually don't have the words or understanding to even verbalize the deep pain and suffering. So hopefully today's webinar helped bring to life what's going on inside you and brought some words and language to the grief and loss issues you have. The other issue when you're going to others to try to process your grief and loss is that our culture and those around us don't tend to be very good about messy emotions. We often we can't watch someone in struggle. It's too much for our monkey brains. We're like, oh, someone's in pain. It makes me in pain and I don't like it. I want to run away. This sounds too scary. We judge it. We don't feel, we try to fix it. We offer just empty platitudes, you're great and that person's an idiot and you deserve all great things in life. And the worst thing I think is we create this timeline for someone who's in grief and struggle, that, you have the right to talk about it and be in pain for like 6 weeks, but then you just need to get in line and carry on and quit your whining. So just pay attention to that. Those are often the obstacles to leaning into somebody else when you're processing grief and loss. And you often just need to work hard to find someone or something or a group or a professional who can actually hold space for these messy emotions and empathize. Also, an issue with grief and loss is that every person grieves in a different way at different times, and they will view the loss different. So the loss, the tangible loss, so I always say like a family could lose one person, but each one of them will view the loss in a different way. They'll experience it in a different way. And so just understand there's not a very specific protocol. We need to fight the urge to compare losses with others. The worst loss that you will experience, the worst grief that you will experience in your entire life is your own grief and loss. And you just need to get comfortable with that. Don't kind of gaslight yourself and say, oh, there's children starving in this world. I don't have the right to be upset about this situation. No, you can acknowledge it and then move through it. Struggle with grief and loss is acknowledging that grief and loss kind of sometimes never leave you. They kind of just more like absorb into the rest of your story, the rest of your life. Like they'll say in a 10-year marriage, let's say there was a 1-year affair. Do you apply that betrayal and pain to the entire 10 years of marriage? Or can you just absorb it into a part of your life that was painful, that brought you to your knees, that was dark, but there was things learned and a deeper understanding about suffering and the complexities of love and vulnerability that maybe you now have that you didn't have it before. Of course, we wish we'd never gone through it, but that's a different version of the story. Vulnerability will always come with risk and uncertainty, but we crave connection and we want to be able to show ourselves, all of us, and have them love us despite or even maybe because of our flaws. So you can't give up on living and loving and being vulnerable and connecting with people. But hopefully with some of these skills that we offer you in these webinars, it'll help you do it in a way that feels more empowered and safer. This is important. The grief and loss that has occurred in your life will shape you forever. You will never be able to go back to your former self, your former view of life. You get to decide if it's going to be the type of loss and trauma that makes you constantly feel like you're being victimized, that you're never going to be safe with anybody, that you'll be disempowered to the whims and the chaos of this world. Or it can expand your ability to understand and empathize with others suffering and struggling, to be there for other people, to be there for yourself, to be there for your family with this new information that you've learned through this very difficult process. Everything doesn't have to happen for a reason, but you can eventually find acceptance in this crisis and tragedy and make some form of meaning from it. And like David Kessler said, your loss is your own fingerprint. So that kind of meaning that you develop from it is your own. It's a process. So hopefully you can move into that new orientation and make meaning and adjust into this new reality and come to terms inside your mind and body. This non-dualistic, it can be this and this and this and this all at the same time. I can hold space for my anger, my hurt, my joy, my hope, my gratitude, and I'm comfortable with all of them sitting at the conference table with me all at the same time and giving each of them their own voice and opportunity to share. And that is what I have for grief and loss work. So I'm ready for questions.
Great. I have one question for you, there was more, but this one, because you said everybody's got their own timeline and you don't talk about timelines, but how do you decide if am I stuck in this place, versus, like I'm moving through it with, the speed bumps that happen along the way. So how do I know if I'm on a journey or if I'm just stuck? Does that make sense?
That's a really good one because a lot of people, I'll tell them when they're in this pain and they're just asking questions and what they feel like is floundering, I let them know this is them moving and changing. I feel like there's more stagnation that occurs when people are pretending like nothing's wrong.
Okay.
Like those are the people that I'm kind of like, watch out, they're going to explode at some point. But maybe they're just like, oh, they've turned their hurt and their pain and now they're just like trying to perfect every other element of their life or perform and go into workaholism, or try to seek validation in dating or some other outlet because they're in so much pain. So I think people just even sitting there in the depths of their pain, crying, being stuck, struggling, asking questions, lamenting, that is all your brain just trying to reconcile and make sense of it.
You can always email me, tami@seekingintegrity.com. You can find Kristin on her website, KristinSnowden.com. And I always pass things through if you email me too. So all good. Thank you. So join Kristin. We'll be back October 17th and 31st. It will be on our calendar. So she has, those are Thursdays, not Wednesdays, but will be on our calendar. For other opportunities to connect with Kristin.
If you join my Instagram site, I'll try to send reminders and the links and stuff like that. So
perfect.
Thank you, everyone.